Our first impression of Lima was the heavy traffic and air pollution, but it didn't take long before we were impressed and attracted by the unique culture and vibrancy of the city. We stayed in the Miraflores district for 3 days. We did a lot of walking around the district. We went to Miraflores Central Park and the Larcomar district next to the coast. The Larcomar district is famous for a big shopping mall with fantastic ocean views. We enjoyed the panoramic view of the endless Pacific Ocean and had lunch at a restaurant as if we were locals. Miraflores Central Park is the main public park in the Miraflores district and is nicknamed Kennedy Park after American President John F. Kennedy. The public park was vibrant and vivid with concerts and flea markets day and night. We had a good time walking around the park and experiencing the local life. We also visited an impressive pre-Inca ruin site that was made entirely of mud bricks. Huacachina is located right in the center of Lima and is a great place to visit if you want a little bit of history in the city. We enjoyed the 3 days we spent in Lima. We missed out on seeing the old town as we had difficulty getting an Uber downtown. Other than that though, we had a great time and would definitely like to come back someday. Using the Peruhop bus, we moved on from Lima to Paracas. Paracas is a small port town in the Cusco province of southern Peru, located about 4 hours south of Lima. The town is an ideal departure point for the Ballestas Islands because it is home to sea lions, pelicans, and humboldt penguins. It's nicknamed the Peruvian Galapagos. The town itself is very small and just used as a launching point for the nearby islands and nature reserve. Also worth visiting is the Paracas National Reserve, located close to the town. It includes huge coastal deserts, a few islands, and surrounding marine habitats. The vistas are just spectacular. We were really impressed with the natural beauty surrounding Paracas. The Ballestas Islands and the nature reserve were spectacular, and it's worth the trip from Lima if you can make it down there. Famous for its giant sand dunes surrounding a desert oasis with a natural spring, the town of Huacachina is an amazing place to stay for a night or two. We stayed for just 1 night, and that's probably enough for most. Outside of the dune buggies and sandboarding, there's not much to do besides checking out the desert. But in spite of our limited options, we were glad we visited. We arrived in the mid-afternoon, so we quickly checked in and then made our way out of town towards the giant sand dunes surrounding it. Because of the loose sand, it took some time to make our way up to the top of the ridge. Once we reached the top, we could see the whole view of the lagoon and the town. We stayed there until the sun set, enjoying one of the most beautiful ones we've ever seen. We had no regrets with our short stay in Huacachina, and highly recommend staying there for at least a night or two. Located about 280 miles from Lima, our next stop were the Nazca lines, on the way to the town of Nazca. A place that has fascinated us since we were kids. We were able to see 3 of the lines from the top of the viewing tower: the lizard lines, the tree lines, and the toad lines with giant hands. If you don't mind spending more time and money, you could book private flights over the Nazca lines, but we were limited with our time, so they were enough for us. After seeing the Nazca lines, we continued on to the town of Nazca. We just stayed overnight at an Airbnb and then spent a short time in the town before taking another overnight bus to Arequipa. There wasn't very much to do in the town, and it's really only a stop on the way to somewhere else. Depending on your interests, the Nazca lines may or may not be a must-see. You could certainly skip them, as many people do, but we were glad we visited them on the way to Arequipa. We arrived early in the morning in Arequipa after an overnight bus from Nazca. The elevation had increased, but luckily we felt little difference, even though we were tired from a rough night's sleep on the bus. This was a memorable city. We enjoyed visiting the monastery of Santa Catalina de Siena, as well as places like Alpaca World, dedicated to the alpacas, and the historical central part of town. Although we didn't do the popular Colca Canyon tour, we ended up doing a tour of 3 amazing places, including the Ruta del Silar salt route and the Quebrada de Caribrias ravine and archaeological site. These locations were beautiful, and I would feel they are must-visit places if you're around Arequipa. From the views of a misty volcano from the Anahuara viewpoint to the old town and the beautiful restaurants we enjoyed, Arequipa was one of our favorite stops in the entire tour. To get to our next destination of Puno, we took a domestic bus line called Transvela instead of Peruhop because we didn't want to take another overnight trip again. At 12,500 feet above sea level, although we didn't feel anything during the bus ride, Kim felt something soon after we arrived in Puno. We began drinking coca tea as every hotel had it in their lobby. It's something we would do until the end of our trip in the south. The reason we were in Puno was a day trip on Lake Titicaca. It was a wonderful experience and quite a unique cultural one too. We got to learn about the local customs and the floating islands right on the lake. And we were lucky. We had great weather the day we were there. It was really enjoyable. You can do Lake Titicaca as an overnight trip, but we felt a day trip was more than enough. Puno is a bit distant from the main part of the Inca Trail, but if you want a unique experience, Lake Titicaca is well worth a visit, especially if you're continuing on towards Bolivia. We got up early to take a 6:30 a.m. bus departing from Puno to Cusco. This was not a regular Peruvian bus like Transvela or even Peruhop. In this case, it was a local company called Inca Express that did day tours between Puno and Cusco. Instead of simply heading towards Cusco, we stopped at a number of places along the way, as well as a buffet lunch that was included in the price. We made a few interesting stops along the way, including the Raya Pass, which was the highest place so far in our journey at 14,200 feet. We also stopped at the Raqui Archaeological Complex, which had some interesting ruins. And our last stop on the tour was a very beautiful church called St. Peter the Apostle in a small town. Whether you feel the tour is worth it is up to you. We were pretty happy with it overall, and it broke up the monotony of the trip up to Cusco. We stayed in Cusco for 4 days in total, with 3 days spent on day trips outside the city. There was more than enough to do inside the city as well, as we continued to acclimatize to the high altitude and thin air in preparation for the upcoming trip to Machu Picchu. In Cusco, we spent most of our time wandering around in the old town and downtown. Aside from the traffic, both sections of Cusco are very walkable. The traffic pollution did sometimes bother us when it got congested, but other than that, there were lots of different ways to get from one place to another. One place we visited was Curicancha. It used to be a 15th century Inca temple, but was captured and destroyed in the 16th century and replaced by church and monastery. When we passed by Curicancha, people were rehearsing for a performance. After dinner, we came back to watch the special Inca ceremony later that night. We think the recreation of the ceremony was the highlight of our time in Cusco. The free open-air performance was really well done, and we felt lucky to see it. One useful tip we can give you is to pick up the Boleto tourist card. This regional card is very useful if you're going to visit most of the interesting sites in and around Cusco. It includes entry fees to a number of local museums, as well as some larger ruins like More and Pisac. The city of Cusco is located in the Sacred Valley area, so there are many ruins nearby. On one day, we chose 4 different Inca ruins to visit. They were the ruins of Zachéuman, Pucapucara, Tambomache, and Kengo. After checking reviews online, we hired a private taxi and transfer service called Taxi Datum. They were affordable and professional. We highly recommend them if you plan to move around several places in Cusco, as it's much easier than taking a group tour. We had a great time in Cusco, and would recommend spending at least 3 or 4 days there. It was a great base of operations to visit much of the Sacred Valley, and it helped us on our way onwards towards Ollantaytambo and Machu Picchu. On another day, we visited the ruins of Pisac, located about an hour's drive from Cusco. We chose the Taxi Datum service once again, as we had a good experience with them the previous day. Pisac is an impressive site, and it ended up being one of our favorites in all of Peru. It's a fortress that's an outstanding example of Incan ingenuity, combining military, agricultural, and religious functions in one strategic location. The way the site overlooks the valley is one of the most impressive features, as well as the giant terraces just below it. We really had a great time in Pisac. Even though it was the height of summer, the weather was perfect and there were very few people at the site. We highly recommend it as a place to visit if you're in the Cusco area. We needed to get from Cusco to Ollantaytambo and found that the Taxi Datum service we'd been using for the past few days filled that need. Instead of traveling by bus, we booked a day trip that went from Cusco to Ollantaytambo with some interesting stops along the way. Our first stop was Chinchero, a picturesque town located next to a valley and a set of archaeological ruins. The most dramatic destination of the day was the Mara salt mines. The huge swath of white that suddenly appeared in our view as we passed over the valley was a big surprise. It reminded us of our trip to Pamukkale, Turkey a few years back. Our last destination were the circular terraces of More. A short walk from the parking lot led us to 5 huge circular terraces that were used as a kind of agricultural research station by the Incas. It was an impressive sight as well, and very quiet and out of the way. We highly recommend doing any or all of these activities. They're very different from the rest of the valley, and unique in their own way. It took a little more than an hour to reach Ollantaytambo from More. We could experience quiet country roads and beautiful mountain vistas during the trip, since our taxi driver took a different way out of More. The Inca ruins surrounding Ollantaytambo are some of the most significant and well-preserved ones in all of Peru. On top of this, the town has some beautiful streets, canals, and original buildings preserved. We spent one full day in Ollantaytambo just exploring the ruins surrounding the town. After breakfast, we walked from our hotel to the main ruins, and then, going higher and higher up the ruins, we found fewer and fewer tourists were around, and the crowds eventually disappeared. It was quite an impressive view from the top. And from that view, we could see 2 more sets of ruins, which we would eventually explore later that day. We're glad we stayed a few nights in Ollantaytambo. We really enjoyed the local sights. The town was compact, picturesque, and had some great ruins within walking distance. In some ways, we enjoyed it even more than Machu Picchu. During our stay in Ollantaytambo, it was finally time for a trip to our bucket list destination of Machu Picchu. We took a train to Aguas Calientes, the town located at the bottom of the ruins. It was a very long day, getting the bus, the train, walking and waiting until you finally got to the entrance. But once you got in, it was very impressive. We did Circuit 2, which is considered the classic circuit. It had great views of Machu Picchu as well as the valleys. Although there were bottlenecks in the crowds at the beginning of the tour, if you kept going, eventually things would thin out, and there's a little bit more space. And at the end of the tour, you might even get to see the llamas. Between the crowds and the lineups, it was a very long and exhausting day at Machu Picchu. But nevertheless, it was definitely worth it. It's a unique destination, and we were glad we went, in spite of the cost and time to get there. However, we do feel there were other destinations which were almost as worthy and a lot easier to enjoy. After finishing our time in the south of Peru, we headed up to the northwestern region. We took a domestic flight from Cusco to Lima, and then one more flight from Lima to Trujillo. We spent our last week in Trujillo and the surrounding area. With a population of just under 1 million, Trujillo was Peru's 3rd largest metropolitan area. We spent some time in and around the downtown area, and then did a couple day trips to the ruins located nearby. For our day trip to the Temple of the Sun and Moon, we used a local taxi service, and the cost was not too bad. The site itself is located in a flat, dusty area. There's a small museum next to the entrance, and guides are required to be hired for the tour. However, the guides are very cheap, and our guide was very good at English and also very knowledgeable as well. The Temple of the Sun and Moon represent Moche culture, a group that existed before the Incas along the coast of Peru around 1,000 years ago. We also visited the ruins of Chan Chan, a UNESCO World Heritage Site that is located not far from Trujillo. This represents Chimu culture and used to be the capital city of the Chimu. Chan Chan is considered to be the largest adobe city in the world. The ruins in the north are very different from the ones we experienced in the south with Inca culture, and it shows just how many different civilizations existed in Peru centuries ago. Although getting around was not as easy as it is in the south, we enjoyed the different experience up in Trujillo and the surrounding ruins. It also set us up for our last experience, which would be the nearby city of Huanchaco. From Trujillo, we took a short taxi ride to Huanchaco. The town is really for surfers, and when we went, it was off-season, so even the surfing was quieter. We didn't mind, as it was a nice way to finish up the trip and see the ocean, as we hadn't seen it since Paracas early on in the trip. One of the best parts of Huanchaco was the sunsets, as they were as good as anything we'd experienced in Greece, Jamaica, or even Costa Rica. Our room had a view overlooking the ocean, and we saw the surfers each night outside our window. We never got tired of that. We also did a day trip to El Brujo, a set of ruins located about 1 hour north of Huanchaco, close to the coast. El Brujo was one of the most important religious sites for Moche culture. The complex has a number of pyramids, and also contains a famous mummy of a woman who was heavily tattooed and buried at the site. This was the end of our month in Peru. The week in the north felt a little less comfortable than the south, and things went a little less smoothly. Part of it was our fault, as we had grown accustomed to everything being very clear and straightforward, as it was in the south part of the country. But we did enjoy seeing a different side of Peru, and felt this part was well worth the visit. We didn't get to visit every famous location in Peru. In particular, we missed out on some good ones in the center and the north of the country, as well as the Amazon. But we felt we did the best we could, given the 1 month time frame. Overall, we were very happy with our 4 weeks in Peru. It was everything we'd hoped for and more. We hit the odd rough spot along the way, particularly up north, but things mostly went according to plan. If you're interested in learning more about the trip, you can check out our individual Peru videos found in the playlist on our channel.